Iran. The trap didn't spring when the first missile hit. It sprung the moment the decision was made to fire it. Everything after that, the burning frigates, the sailors dying near Sri Lanka, the Iron Dome lighting up over Jerusalem, the rubble in Riyadh and Dubai, that is not a war being fought. That is a war being lost, slowly, by one side, and the clock is already running. Let's talk about what you are actually watching. Because the headlines are giving you a movie: explosions, flags, kill counts, Iran on the ropes, 90% drop in Iranian launchers. We are winning. Very cinematic, very satisfying. If you don't look too hard, what the headlines are not giving you is the math, and the math is brutal. Operation Epic Fury, Day 11. The Secretary of Defense stood at the podium this morning and told you, we are winning. Behind him, a general read off statistics: 5,000 targets struck, hundreds of sorties flown, 90% decline in Iranian missile launch capability. Here is the problem with statistics. Someone already ran this script from 1965 to 1972. We've hit this many targets. We've flown this many sorties. We are accomplishing our mission. Body counts, sortie counts, success metrics. Every single briefing, to the very day the last helicopter lifted off the roof in Saigon, the numbers looked good on paper. The numbers always look good on paper, right up until they don't. The question is never how many targets you hit. The question is whether hitting them changes anything that matters. So far, it hasn't. Iran is still launching. Hormuz is still closed, and the supreme leader is dead. That last part deserves its own sentence because the West was counting on it to break the system open. It didn't. Mojtaba Khamenei stepped forward. The political tier aligned behind the ideological one before the body was cold. The hierarchy didn't fracture. It hardened. The succession was not a crisis. It was a signal. We are still here. Come and get us. Start at the engine room. The economics. Israel hit Iranian oil refineries. Lots of smoke. Looks serious on a screen. Classic economic warfare. Starve production, cut revenue, punish the system. There is just one small problem. Iran does not need its refineries to win this war. Not the ones within reach, anyway. Iran needs one thing: the Strait of Hormuz. And they have it. Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Roughly 20% of the world's entire daily oil supply passes through that channel. Anti-ship missiles on both coastlines, mines, fast attack boats, submarine capability. You do not need to refine oil when you own the pipe that carries everyone else's. Now let's run the actual numbers. 25% of the world's oil supply is now offline. Not for a few days, not for a few weeks, in some cases, indefinitely. The Gulf states have slashed output by 6.7 million barrels per day, 33% of regional production output. Storage tanks are full. Ships come in empty, but there is nowhere to offload. The logistics system was designed for flow, not for storage. When the flow stops, the system breaks. The UAE just shut down the largest oil refinery in the world. No reopening timeline. Qatar is in the same position. Oil has crossed $100 a barrel. It is climbing, and it is not stopping there. Now, at the number almost nobody is reporting, 35% of the world's fertilizer is no longer being shipped. Not oil, fertilizer. The substance that grows food. The thing that feeds billions of people who have never heard of the Strait of Hormuz, never voted for any of this to happen, and are about to start feeling it at the grocery store before they understand why. Natural gas feeds over 40% of United States power generation. Higher gas prices mean immediate utility bill increases. US manufacturers of fertilizers and chemicals face higher feedstock costs. The Federal Reserve cannot cut interest rates into energy-driven inflation. The things Americans buy get more expensive. And the people in Washington telling you this will be over soon, they know all of this. They are just betting you won't connect the dots until after the midterms. The detractors, and I love the detractors, they keep me honest, will say,
economic pressure always brings Iran to the table eventually.
sure, But the question is, who is under more pressure right now? The side whose refineries got hit but still controls the strait? Or the side watching 25% of the world's oil disappear and its allies bleed out in real time? Now, let's talk about the Iron Dome math, because this is where the story becomes almost embarrassing. Each Iranian ballistic missile costs roughly $50,000 to produce and launch. Each Iron Dome interception attempt costs tens of millions of dollars because its costly counter missiles are always fired in swarms. The interception rate against Iran's current ballistic package is sitting around 5%, no matter what the mainstream media is saying. 5%. Iran added decoys to its missile packages, dummy warheads mixed with the real ones, forcing the defense system to spend tens of millions shooting at phantoms, and still missing 95 out of every 100 real incoming rounds. $50,000 per incoming missile, $30 million per interception attempt at scale over months. You cannot sustain a $30 million defense against a $50,000 offense indefinitely. The side with the expensive technology is losing the economic dimension of this war. It has been since day one. And despite the Western media's statements, there is no evidence Iran is running out of missiles. Now, the moment that everyone in the halls of power hoped you would simply scroll past. Approximately 170 girls dead in a primary school in Iran, hit by a US missile. I'm not going to tell you it was deliberate. I'm not going to tell you it was an accident. I'm going to tell you it doesn't matter anymore because the image exists. The grief is real. And in Iran, it has done something that no Western propaganda budget could ever purchase. It handed the Iranian government a unified population. There is a structural principle at work here, and it is ironclad. When a society is under internal tension, political pressure, economic frustration, cultural fracture, a foreign attack does not accelerate the collapse. It reverses it. It welds the cracks shut. Shared ideology reactivates. Shared grief becomes shared identity. The fractures the West was banking on just became the strongest parts of the structure. The generation that followed Western social media, wore Western fashion, quietly dreamed of a different Iran. That generation just watched their government's darkest warnings come true in real time, delivered in the form of rubble and small shoes. Mojtaba Khamenei picked up his father's mantle. Iran is not fracturing under pressure. Iran is crystallizing. Now flip the lens 180 degrees. The United States, what does it believe right now as a civilization? What shared vision holds it together when the pressure rises? What conceptual framework, what cultural identity pulls Americans together toward a common sacrifice if needed? Those are not rhetorical questions. These are diagnostic ones. And the diagnosis is not reassuring. Political machinery running at full volume. Financial interests driving decisions that politicians are performing. The rise phase language still being used, protecting democracy, rules-based order, but the substance underneath has been hollowing out for decades. The gap between what the system says and what it does is no longer a crack. It is a canyon. Two civilizations moving in opposite directions on the same timeline. One hardening under fire, one following under its own weight. If this analysis is helping you see what the noise is hiding, consider joining us on Patreon and Substack. We stay independent because you make it possible. Links are in the description below, and I appreciate it. Now, the architecture of the trap that the cameras are not showing you. Russia is not sending troops to help Iran. Let's be clear about that. Russia has its hands full in Ukraine, and the Russian general staff is not the kind of organization that overreaches when it doesn't have to. Direct military intervention in the Persian Gulf is not on their menu right now. But there is a very wide distance between sending troops and doing nothing. Targeting data, advisors, munitions, missiles, technical consulting on systems Iran is already operating. The kind of help that never appears on satellite image, never requires a press conference, and never gives anyone a legal pretext for escalation. Russia has every incentive to watch the United States burn through its munitions, drain its arsenal below red lines, and exhaust its political capital without firing a single Russian shot. And while that plays out quietly, Putin walked out of his Trump phone call and told Europe something that should have stopped every market cold. Russia is threatening to cut gas supplies to the EU now, before Europe's own April 25 restrictions ever kick in, on Russia's timeline, not Europe's. Europe entered this spring with natural gas storage already 25% below last year, below 30% capacity. Now, add Hormuz closed on one side and Russia threatening the European pipe on the other. Two jaws, one trap, closing simultaneously. Japan imports nearly all of its oil. Germany already killed its nuclear program. South Korea runs on Gulf energy entirely. None of them voted for this war. All of them are about to feel it in ways that no Washington press conference can absorb. And then there is China. China is the wild card that nobody in this administration has gamed out honestly. Beijing just lost access to two sources of discounted oil simultaneously. Venezuelan crude oil cut off, Iranian supply cut off. China is now forced to buy expensive, transparently traded oil on the global market, while its strategic petroleum reserves drain. China holds approximately 100 to 115 days of net input cover. That clock is ticking, and China does not like that. At some threshold, and nobody knows exactly where that threshold is, the oil shortage stops being an inconvenience for Beijing and starts being a strategic emergency. And China's response to strategic emergencies is not to send a diplomatic note. If Chinese aircraft appear over Iranian airspace, or a Chinese carrier group positions itself in the Arabian Sea, or Beijing simply tells Washington enough through back channels that cannot be ignored, the entire operational calculus of this war changes overnight. The administration is betting China will absorb the pain quietly. That is a significant bet. The card Iran has not played yet. The GCC desalination plants have not been targeted. Not yet. The Gulf states produce almost no natural fresh water. They drink desalinated seawater. The infrastructure that makes that possible is industrial, coastal, and fully exposed. If Iran decides to cross that line, and so far it has chosen deliberately not to, you are not looking at a disruption of luxury. You are looking at a survival emergency measured in millions of people with no water in one of the hottest places on Earth. That could be a humanitarian disaster. The fact that Iran has not done it is itself a message: cold, precise, strategic. We are choosing restraint. We play by the rules of international law. We know the card exists, and so do you. Act accordingly. The GCC paid for American protection generously for decades. Bases, warships, flyovers, ceremonial reassurances, and handshakes. What they did not get is a working air defense against a $50,000 ballistic missile. What they did not get is a guarantee their desalination plants will still be running in 6 months. Riyadh got hit. Dubai got hit. Qatar got hit. The Switzerland of the Middle East, where sovereign wealth parked, where mega projects grew from sand, where peaceful investment harbor was the entire brand identity, is getting dismantled in real time. That brand is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It is also now gone. The Peshmerga Gambit, US Special Operations, the possibility of boots on Iranian soil through the Kurdish mountain corridor. Update: the Kurds said no. They looked at the proposal, they looked at the history, they remembered every time they were useful, and then abandoned. And they decided to say no. Turkey has quietly aligned with Iran. Intelligence sharing, back-channel coordination. Two countries with very long memories about what happens when outside powers redesign the neighborhood. So where exactly is the ground force? Iraq was 170,000 square miles, largely flat prairies, desert. The United States assembled 600,000 military personnel, 6 carrier strike groups, the largest coalition since World War II, and still produced a 20-year occupation that ended with a helicopter evacuation. Iran is over 600,000 square miles. Much of it is mountain. 90 million people, 40 years of sanction-hardened industrial self-sufficiency, a population of 90 million that just watched its government confirmed correct, in rubble, in the bodies of school children. You cannot insurgency your way through a unified population defending its own mountains, believing they are on the verge of extermination. This particular chapter for the plan is not strategy. It is improvisation wearing a uniform. The 90-day clock, and we are on day 11 so far. 90 days of sustained high-intensity conflict is roughly the threshold where asymmetric economics starts biting hard. Supply chains, reserve budgets, domestic political will, and alliance cohesion all begin fraying simultaneously. Iran is not trying to win in 90 days. Iran is trying to survive 90 days. That's all they want. There is an enormous difference between those two objectives. One requires a decisive military breakthrough, the other requires simply not collapsing, which a country of 90 million with mountains, with a missile arsenal that costs $50,000 per round, with the world's most important shipping chokehold in its hand, is quite capable of doing. After 90 days, the party with the expensive weapons, the expensive deployments, the fractured domestic consensus, and the allies who are quietly questioning everything, that party starts losing the argument in its own parliament. The pressure does not keep building, it inverts. Iran knows this arithmetic cold. The West invented this game. Iran has been studying it for 40 years. Day 11 of 90. Subscribe now. Hit the bell, because the next episode goes somewhere the mainstream will not touch. What happens when the 90 days math breaks open? Russia's quiet assistance starts showing up in the kill rates. China's patience runs out, and the war that was supposed to relieve domestic pressure starts generating it instead, on multiple continents simultaneously. The question is not whether America can break Iran. The question is whether America can afford the answer. That's a wrap for today, dear friends. I'll see you next week.